In the previous video, we saw how to set up core data and how to save a new item in an entity, and then how to set up a request to bring the data from that item back. In this video, we're going to take that to the next level and see how we can do more complex requests to return specific values, and also how to update and delete the values that are already there. Okay, so first off, let's see how we add an option to our request to only return a particular value. We do that by adding what's known as a predicate. And a predicate is essentially an instruction to only look for certain data with certain properties. And we can set up a predicate using predicate with a capital P. And then usually we use format with string and arguments. And then for the string, we use name equals, and then we use this slightly strange %ampersand. Now, if you've worked with Objective-C before, you'll be familiar with this, but if you haven't, what this essentially means is we're looking for a string here. So %ampersand is short for any object. So it's either a string, or it could be a date or a number, essentially any variable. And then in the arguments, we're going to give a value, and that will be the value for the string. So if, for example, we might want to use Kirsten as our value. And this essentially means look for name equals something where that something is equal to Kirsten. So that's a shorthand way of looking for a particular value within the field name. So predicates are very powerful ways of looking up data in databases. If you want to learn more about what you can use, I would recommend typing something like nspredicate formats into Google. And for me, the top result is this Apple result there. So if we have a look at that, unfortunately it's an Objective-C, but it doesn't matter too much. If you scroll down, you can see it gives you the basic comparisons that you can use. So equals, greater than or equal to, less than or equal to, greater than, less than, etc. And you can even use between or not equal to. You can use and, or, and not to separate multiple predicates and use them in one go. And you can use more advanced comparisons like begins with, contains, ends with, is similar to or like, matches, and even the much more complex UTI conforms to. So I'll leave you to read that if you want. And there's a lot more options that you can use as well. Most of the time though, you'll be looking for when a value is equal to another value. And that's what we're looking for here. So this then should just return the username Kirsten. Oops, I've just realized that I need to make that username, not name. Okay, while we're there, I'm just going to add Tommy when we run this one. And he will be 5. So by the end of running this one, we should have Rob, Kirsten, and Tommy stored in the database, but it should only return Kirsten this time because we've added a particular predicate to do just that. And there you go. You can see it's just returned this single result, Kirsten. So a quick challenge for you. I'm just going to add Ralphie with an age of 2. And can you change the predicate so that it searches for anyone in the database who is less than 10 years old? Less than 10 years old, go for it. Did you manage it? All you needed to do was change username to age and change the equals to a less than, and then we just replace Kirsten with the number 10. And that will search for anyone with an age of less than 10. And notice you don't need to put the 10 outside of the double quotes there. In fact, if you do that, you'll get an error, as you might have done. But this should search for Tommy and Ralphie, and in fact, it will probably return multiple Ralphies for me because I've actually run this a couple of times to test it out. And there we go. So we've got Tommy and indeed 3 Ralphies. Wonderful. So let's now comment out the adding new user commands because we don't need those anymore. And let's see how we update values for particular objects within the database. So let's say Ralphie now wants to be known as his nickname, which is, bizarrely enough, Dooley. So all we do is now we want to search for anywhere that the username is Ralphie. And then if we can get a username, then I'm going to take the result and set its value just like we did up here when we were taking a new user and setting their value. And we'll set the value of Dooley to the key username. And then all we have to do is save that in the usual way. So do catch. So if this fails, I'll put a message rename failed. And we're going to try to save the context. And that's it. So if we now run that, have a think about it, and think what this will return this time. Did you guess right? The answer is it should return nothing, because what it's going to do is get those items of data and then save them as new values, but there's no instruction to print that to the console. So unless something goes wrong and it prints rename failed, we should just get the usual contents of the console and nothing else. And there we go. Wonderful. So now I'm going to remove the predicates and comment out the renaming. And just print the username. So a little challenge again while we're waiting for this to load. What should this print in the console? Now that is an interesting result. And I've actually left that in because I think it's a worthwhile mistake to just see what's happened there. Can you see why we've got this very strange result? The answer is I made the mistake of forgetting to change the less than sign to an equal sign. So it actually searched for everywhere that the username was less than Ralphie. And that is then looking alphabetically, and the only username that was less than Ralphie alphabetically was Kirsten, because Rob and Tommy are both after Ralphie, and of course Ralphie is not less than Ralphie. So we ended up with a unexpected result, but hopefully that's an interesting enough outcome to keep the mistake in there, but I'll change it now just so that we've got the right result there. Finally then, let's see how to delete objects. And what we're going to do is we're now going to delete all of the Ralphies, so we're just left with Rob, Dooley and Tommy. So it's actually really easy. All we do is access the context and then delete an object, and the object that we want to delete is our result. And then we want to save the context. So this time I'm just going to copy the code that we had before and we'll have delete failed there. Okay, so let's run that. And once again, take a moment to think what this is going to return. Now, what did you guess? We've searched for a username equal to Ralphie, and we're deleting all of those usernames, but we're also printing them. So we should get 3 Ralphies and nothing else. There we go. So there's the Ralphies. So now, if we comment out the delete part and remove the predicate, that should show us everything that's left in our core data database. So once again, take a moment to think about what is this going to display in our console. Did you get it? Hopefully, it should just be the names of the people that are left in the database. And that should just be Rob, Dooley, and Tommy, because all the Ralphies were deleted on the previous run. Let's find out. And there we go. Rob, Dooley, and Tommy. So that's how you do advanced searches using predicates, how you update existing database items, and how you delete existing database items within Core Data. So now we're going to practice this by going back over to our login demo app, and we're going to add a couple of features to our login demo. And that is, if a user is logged in, we're going to give them the option to both update their username and to log out if they want to. So update the username and log out if they want to. Go for it. All right, hope you managed it. Let's see how I will solve the problem. So remember, we've got our label there. So if the user is logged in, we want to add the option to log out. So I'm going to do that with a button just down here. So that will say log out. And actually that's the only new user interface item that I need. And then let's just bring in our outlet for our button. So this is our log out button. And we'll also bring in an action for logging the user out. There we go. So now we just need to write our code to make this work. So let's start off by thinking about what we need to do when the user logs out. So first off, we need to delete everything from core data. So let's go through that process. We'll set up our app delegate again. We could do this in a separate method if we wanted to, because we are replicating code here. But just to keep things really simple for now, I'll use this more than once. Assistant container and view context. So we want to get everything from core data. So we're going to create a request, which is going to be an NS fetch request with an entity name of users. And the NS fetch request will return objects of type NS fetch request result. Now here for once, we don't need returns object as false to be false, because we don't actually care what the username is, because whatever happens, we're going to delete it. So let's go straight to our do try catch. So here we'll just print delete failed. So we want to create our results variable, which is going to be the result of running the fetch request on the context. And then if results.count is greater than 0, then we'll loop through our results. So for result in results, and of course we're only expecting one result, but we'll delete them all anyway. And then we want to take our context and delete the result, i.e. anything that's been taken from the database. And then we're going to do another do try catch. And I'll call this individual delete failed, just so we know that it's different to the previous one. And what we want to do is try to save the context. There we go. And we also want to, if we're successful here, log the user out, which in effect means taking the label and setting the alpha to 0, taking the log out button and setting the alpha to 0, taking the text field and setting the alpha to 1, and then taking the log in button and setting the alpha to 1 as well. There are other ways of showing and hiding objects that we could use at this point, but using the alpha is a perfectly good one. So let's just try this out. We should now be able to log in. In fact, we should be automatically logged in because we logged in the previous time we ran the app. And then this time, when we see the login screen, we should be able to log out. So let's take a look. And here we go. So it says, "Hi there, Rob." And we have the option to log out. And I actually got a crash there, which I thought I'd leave in. And the reason is, as you might have spotted, I forgot to cast my results variable to an array of NS managed objects. And I need to do that to be able to manage them in that way, i.e. to delete them from the context. So let's just try that again. Should now work fine. Here we go. So let's log out. And now we're back to the login screen. Fabulous. So let's now just run the app from scratch just to check. We should, of course, be faced with the login screen, and that will show that we've successfully deleted all the items in core data, which means that the user's username is not being saved. And there we go. Fantastic. There was something that I forgot though. And that was to set the logout button's alpha to 0 by default. So let's just fix that. There we go. Okay, so now logout is working. The second challenge was to allow the user to update their username. So to do that, we're going to need to make a few other changes because we want the user to be able to update their username at any time. So let's change the option to hide and show the text field. We're going to keep that all the time. And similarly with the button, but I do want to make a slight change to the button. I want to change the title to update username for, you'll remember we use the empty array symbol for the default control state, i.e. the default state of the button. And then we'll have to remember when we log out, instead of setting the login button alpha to 0, we'll just set the title to login as it was before. Okay. So now all that remains is to actually update the user's username when they update it by clicking the login button. So now we're going to need to know whether the user is logged in or not. So let's have a Boolean is logged in, which initially will set to be false. And then if the user is logged in automatically at the beginning of the app, we'll set is logged in to true. And when we log the user out, we'll set is logged in to false. And now we'll check. In fact, we need the app delegate and the context either way. So let's check here to see if the user is logged in. And if they are, then we want to update their username. And if they're not, then we want to set their username. So let's just indent all of that nicely. There we go. So here, now we want to update the existing username. So that starts with a request. So our good old NS fetch request using an entity name of users. And we need to specify that this returns an NS fetch request result. Again, we don't need any predicates because we want to select everything in the database, and we can return the objects as false because we don't need to know what the value of the old username was because we're just going to set it to the new value. So let's run the request. So if we have a problem, we'll print update username failed. And we're going to try to run the fetch request on the context. And in fact, we'll attempt to set our result variable equal to that. And then we can test to see if result.count is greater than 0. In fact, I want those to be results. And if results.count is greater than 0, we're going to loop through them. So for result in results as an array of NS managed objects. Actually, I'm going to force cast that. And we want to take the result and we want to set a value. And the value that we want to set is text field dot text. And the key is name, just as we set it over here in the data model. And then finally, we just save the context So this is another do try catch. So update username save failed. And the thing that we want to try and do is save the context. And one other thing that we need to do here, and that is update the label. Just make sure we do it in the right place. There we go, that'll do. So we'll set the label text to be equal to hi there plus the new username, which is text field dot text, and we'll need to unwrap it there, and a friendly exclamation mark at the end. And of course I've forgotten my try in front of context save. So there we go. Now if the user is logged in, it will run a request and update the username, as well as updating it on the label. And if the user's not logged in, then it will create a new username in the database, and of course update that in terms of labels and alphas, etc. So we should now be able to log in with a particular username, change that username while we're logged in, and then log out completely if we want to. All right, so let's start off by logging in. And I'll log in as Kirsten this time. And we'll tap login. And we get, hi there, Kirsten. Ah, that's great. But we can't see the log out button. So let's just add in the code to show the log out button when we're logged in. And we may need to add some code to hide it when we log out. Nope, that's already there. Great. As it happens, we don't need the log out button until our next run anyway, because we're going to delete the existing username and add in a different one. And that's interesting. Our login button text hasn't changed. So let's just see what's going on there. Ah, yes. So I think we've updated the login button incorrectly here. So we want to update the login button back to login only when we log the user out. So that's here. And here, of course, is the manual login code. So this is where we want to set the title to update username, same as if the user is automatically logged in. Okay, no matter, we should now find that when we run the app again, firstly, we'll have fixed both of those bugs. So it will show the buttons correctly and have the correct button text. But most importantly, it will have saved the user's username and it will say, hi there, Tommy. And that will show us that the update of the username has worked fine. And then we'll just do a final log out to check that that works, and we're good to go. There we go. Yep, almost. We just need to make that button a little bit bigger, but let's check the log out. And looks like we have one more bug to squash. When we log out, the text field is no longer displaying. Yes, I must have removed that at some point. So let's just bring that back in. Set the alpha back to 1, and on the main storyboard, we'll just stretch that button out so it's big enough, and we'll align the text to the right so it looks the same as it did before. Okay, so just a final check. We'll just do a single login and log out this time, just to make sure our button and our text field displays correctly. And here we go. So let's log ourselves in. We'll be Ralphie this time. And then we'll tap login. And with any luck, we'll say, hi there, Ralphie. Update username. Our logout button still isn't displaying. And why is that? We've clicked log in there. Should be setting everything up there. And actually, that's where we need to set the logout button. Alpha is equal to 1. So that should fix that problem. But the update username is now showing correctly. So let's do an absolutely final check. Run the app one more time. It should say hello to Ralphie. We should see the logout button. And then when we press log out, we should be properly logged out, but the text field should display. And there we go. That's a lot better. We have our hi there, Ralphie, but we have the ability to update the username if we want to. So then let's just tap log out and we should get logged out in the usual way. And there we go. We've got the login screen now displaying correctly. Excellent. So that's really all you need to know about Core Data. You now know how to set it up, how to create a data model, and then how to save items to that data model and restore them to access them, to use them in your app. And also then later on how to update and even delete items from your database. We'll be, of course, revisiting Core Data when we build our blog reader app at the end of this section. But for now, we need to take a bit of a diversion and learn some new skills that we'll need for the app. And the first one is how to download and permanently save images from the web. And we'll be doing that in the next video.